For Father's Day, I want to honor 4 men that have been very influential throughout my life, but especially inspirational when it comes to working in the shop and creativity.
We are the Follises, Sherry and Sean. We started turning stitches to share our creativity with you. Please follow along and see what we create next.
The other day I was walking through the shop and I realized that I was extremely fortunate for a couple things. One is just to have a shop, to be creative in and to be able to work out of. The other thing was that I'm constantly surrounded by very simple items in many instances of people that were so influential to me. And I'm talking about my father, Mike Follis. I'm talking about Sherry's dad, Gordon Langston. And once I started thinking about those 2 men specifically, then I realized also that I kind of have to include in that list my grandfather, Ray Follis, and my uncle, Hank Lohman, because all 4 of these men showed me so many things in life, but more specifically, being able to help them from being a young age all the way up, help them on different projects they had, just learning things in the shops has been an invaluable lesson and one I'll cherish forever. So I just want to pay tribute to each of those 4 today in this brief video. So a couple of things that I've been able to hang on to from my dad are just some different router tools that he had. I remember him making signs back in the days before CNCs and things like this, and you can still use these, but this is a great sign template to make signs. I remember him making and selling signs when I was a kid, and just different parts of things out of his shop are very inspirational. But the one thing that really kind of speared, kind of generated this video and all of these different thoughts as Father's Day was approaching. And let me share that with you. So I'm going to wander through the shop for a moment, and I'm going to show you something that I keep literally in the middle of the shop all the time. And it's an item that you're not going to expect. And it's really here just for decoration. And that's my dad's spatula. So why is a spatula so special? So it's my understanding, at least as the story goes, that this spatula was in a kit or in a barbecue set that my parents received as a wedding gift, which would have been a long time ago. But for me, what I remember when I was a kid was, especially on weekends, when it was decent outside, my dad was always at the grill. And this was always the primary tool that he used. So this is one of those things that just has a very special, memory. It's a childhood memory, but most importantly, I would say it is also, after Sherry and I got married 32 years ago, roughly, we also got a grill, a charcoal grill, for a wedding gift. And I remember, even though I'd been watching my dad barbecue all kinds of things for years and years and years, what I remember most is the first time I fired up that grill. I think I did burn hamburgers, which I think is a common mistake. We always, anytime you're just trying to figure out grilling, I think hamburgers seem like a simple thing, but the grease from the hamburgers always create fires. So it was kind of a chilling experience. But I remember after we were married and having that grill, I remember my dad coming down to our house at one point, not too long after my first attempt, and not only did he help me out on the grill and give me some pointers, but he left that. So he had upgraded his grill tools by that point, but he left me with this one, and I've had it ever since. We've been married for 30 years, and or over 30 years, and Well, I mean, there's a good chance this spatula, if like I mentioned, if the story is correct that it was a wedding gift for my parents, it's probably over 50 years old. But I keep it, as you can kind of see here. It's just kind of the central post in the shop, and I just love having it around. And it was literally walking through the shop where I just kind of bumped into it accidentally, and that just made me realize how fortunate I am to not only have this fantastic memory of my dad and something that he kind of helped me with as a young adult and learning life and just all that stuff. And then it started making me think of all the other lessons and the inspiration from the shop. So the other thing that I remember working with my dad from the youngest age, I had a toy tool set that I don't remember. I probably got it for a Christmas or birthday or something along those lines, but the tools were small, right, for children, but they worked, right? The handsaw would saw, the hammer would pound nails, and I can remember using that tool set to take scraps that were in his shop when he was working on things, and just playing in the floor, trying to build anything I could put together with the few little tools I had. And so that's what I remember growing up, was always being in the shop, always trying to help my dad, no matter how old I was, just being around that stuff kind of constantly. So of course I can't thank my dad, Mike Follis, enough for just being a inspiration and showing me how to be creative, how to build things, how to make things. And so anytime I have the opportunity to break these things out and especially use them, that's the most fun. And so it's just a great reminder of childhood and young adulthood and just all the lessons we've learned kind of going along the way. The other man that was extremely pivotal and very inspirational I would say in my journey to build and create is Sherry's dad, Gordon Langston. Sherry and I met, we were high school sweethearts, we were teenagers, and I always did a lot of work with him in his shop out on the north side of Springfield and way, and anywhere else that, that I could help out. And this is actually a hand plane that after he passed a few years ago, that I found in the bottom of one of his toolboxes. And it was a lot of fun to just take this little block plane here and get it all cleaned up. It looks like I need to work on the sole of it again. But these are the kinds of things I grab those things and use them all the time. The other big piece that I have of Gordon's is this drill press back here in the back, and a few other things that I was able to save of his. So anytime we're working on this stuff, and I think Sherry probably feels similarly when she's down here, she loves to use the old drill press. It does remind her of a child and that being in her dad's shop, of course, and that sander and just anytime I'm using those tools, you get that nice warm feeling. It's kind of like getting a hug from these great people who were so influential in our lives and who are no longer with us, but it does give us the opportunity to remember them and think of them and think of all the great times that we had building and creating things. So those two men in particular, my father, Sherry's father, were exceptionally inspirational, and it was always a joy and pleasure to build things with them and create, and I think it's just sort of kind of in our blood that we kind of get from them. But as I think about my dad and Sherry's dad, I can't forget my grandfather and my uncle Hank. they were also inspirational. We did all kinds of things together over time. I wish I had tools and things like that from my grandfather, but I remember actually one of the interesting stories of, and I'm going to kind of focus on the lathe for a second. My first attempt outside of 8th grade shop of turning anything was courtesy of my grandfather. So he had this little, I think they still kind of sell these things. They're basically like it's a little kit that you sort of strap a power drill into, and you use the drill as sort of the motor for a lathe, and it has a tailstock and all that stuff. And I tried to set that up. I loved from the time I was took 8th grade shop and had the opportunity to work at the lathe. That was really what hooked me on turning, and that was when I was 12, 13 years old. So 40 years ago. I never forgot that experience, and tried to replicate it with the stuff that my grandfather had. Knowing now that I know now having some experience in wood turning, the problem with that setup probably didn't have anything to do with the drill or the little base. It probably had more to do with tools not being sharp. So that was probably the weakness of trying to do wood turning with that kind of rudimentary setup, but it was probably tools that weren't sharp. But it just sort of demonstrates how all of these men in my life helped me along the way and helped teach me, giving me opportunities to be creative, giving me opportunities to learn how to build and make things. So being able to do things like building that workbench, or I've got a stack of chair parts over here that we're working on, creating that adjustable stool. That's actually just a prototype, but all of these things I wouldn't be able to do without the influence of my dad, Sherry's dad, my grandfather, and my uncle. All of these men inspired me in many, many different ways, not only in the shop, but in other areas of life. And I can't thank them enough for all of the lessons that I've gained over time from all of them. So even though none of them are with us any longer, I do want to say Happy Father's Day to all of them. They were all very inspirational. I miss them all dearly every day. And I hope everyone else has a happy Father's Day. Go out, give your dads and those people that influence you and your children, give them a hug for me today, and have a fantastic day.